While doing all this, it's important to realize that there are different constituents and groups out there. For example, you might have somebody like the permission granting group. You can't go as any organization, for example, and distribute polio vaccines or disseminate information on AIDS. You need the permission support in permission of the government in most cases to do such things. So that is a very vital kind of a group. You need that permission to actually get started on that activity. Second, you need the support. You take the case of polio vaccines. Rotary International helps in getting those vaccines, but it needs to work in tandem with the state and central government health system. The Anganwadi workers, for example, the health workers in different areas to actually distribute the vaccine. It might need the use of the cold chain as well in many cases. It may also need private sector support. So there are support groups out here which can help you in this process. The third thing, obviously, there will be opposition. Take polio again. There was some misinformation that among certain religious communities in certain parts of India, that this actually is a way by which you sterilize somebody. So there are religious groups, there are other kinds of groups which will create all kinds of challenges for you, and you do not know what sometimes can happen when you embark on such programs with all the best intentions. So it's wise to also consider who might oppose it and take them on board in some fashion. Then there are those who also evaluate what you do. For example, there are people who have done pharma related, drug related clinical trials. Some of them have used different kinds of mechanisms and techniques and methods which have really not been ethically right in some cases. And there are legislative evaluations, there are medical peer evaluation groups who actually comment, review, monitor, appraise all these kinds of activities. So it's important for us to look at how these different groups behave and how to bring them on board at every stage. Now, one of the things one has to remember is also, apart from these groups, is what kind of an organization that is required to actually do non-profit marketing. One, it depends, as we always seen, on who you want to talk to. So, how do you identify the patients, clients, members you want to serve? Second, you have to conceive, develop, execute, complete different kinds of programs, activities, services, workshops, whatever you call it. Then you might want to decide if you're giving it free or there is a price to be paid, right? So you might think many times non-profit or social marketing, I'm supposed to be getting a benefit, they're doing it from the goodness of their heart. Doesn't always work that way. You need to use different terminologies because all these costs money. So in some cases, somebody has to pay the bill in some fashion. So it could be things like donations, charitable, whatever things. It can be fees, so on and so forth. There are different terms that are being used out here. Similarly, many of these organizations don't claim to make a profit. What they really make is a surplus of income over. It's, as we have seen again and again, what is the objective? What do you want to achieve at the end of the day? Then the kind of schedule of the events, programs, and communication, which is vital. There are different kinds of social marketing organizations based on different factors. One is on the degree of the tangibility. For example, you might have something like a university or government based on the organization. It can be also people like political party candidates, for example. It can be places. It can be a physical convention center or a hall of some sort. It can be ideas on the other side, like AIDS. We talked about drug de-addiction and so on and so forth. It can be goods. There are all kinds of journals. There can be food stamps or whatever kinds of stamps. It can be services like education. So you have things which are very tangible, you can see, touch, feel, to things which are at the very, very nebulous idea related stage. So you can have organizations of all sorts in this. So you might have somebody calling themselves a think tank, and then you might have somebody else who actually has physical on the ground structures with all kinds of things to actually educate people. Organization structure based on whether it is government sponsored, whether it is private, it is cooperative, or some other kind of creature. Then the third thing is on the broad objectives of the organization. Is it health oriented, education oriented, welfare oriented, gender oriented, blah blah. And then finally, it can also be on the basis of constituencies. It can be, for example, based on the users or the donors' desire. It can be, for example, religious orientation based, or it can be an organization by, for and of women, so on and so forth. So you get it that there are several ways. Now it can be that an organization could be a women oriented constituency with the objective of improving the health, okay, and a private organization. So it can be all that which has certain tangible things. So it can be a combination of all of this. Now there are broadly two main approaches to non-profit marketing. One which is more development oriented, the second which is campaign oriented. In the first one, what you're looking at is a long-term kind of a relationship with certain target audiences. For example, alumni associations of large universities or educational institutions. In the US, for example, say Harvard, Stanford, etc., have long-standing alumni relations programs, and year after year the alumni manages to help the organization substantially through donations and many other, in-kind, in-cash kind of contributions. The second is mostly promotional, money-oriented appeals. Here the orientation is towards the organization needs. You find this all the time happening. You have organizations say like CRY, HelpAge, World Vision, All Hindu Mission, etc., sending periodic appeals on a regular basis and also sometimes event based. Suppose there is a tsunami, for example, or a flood somewhere, so for disaster relief and things like that. So these are two broad things, one which is more long term, one which is more specific, campaign oriented or need based. So we have seen quite a bit about things like non-profit or non-business marketing in general. We have seen that it involves marketing activities to achieve goals other than your classic business-oriented marketing goals. There are broadly two categories we have seen of social marketing and non-profit marketing. And really the thing is, in social you are trying to use marketing methods to actually spread the dissemination of socially beneficial ideas. And in the case of non-profit, it is an effort by private or public non-profit organizations to bring about mutually satisfying exchanges, that is between themselves and their different constituents. The type of marketing we have seen changes based on various aspects like the cause or the ideas, the beneficiaries, the donors, the exchange processes, the objectives, and so on and so forth. Now this is very important for us to consider that not-for-profit marketing, non-profit marketing, social marketing, basically non-business marketing is on the rise in India, and there is a greater demand for professionals in this space.